Welcome back to Talking Dragon Age, the show where I talk about Dragon Age. This episode is about the Forgotten Ones. The absence of any information on them in Trespasser, and the fact that there was so little information on them to begin with, really annoyed me at first. But now I think I get it. I get why there's so little information on them, and it's actually awesome. Let's take a look at one of the most significant mentions of them, Gelderons Claim, found in the Frostback Basin in Jaws of Hakkon.
There are no gods. There is only the subject and the object, the actor and the acted upon. Those with the will to earn dominance over others gain title not by nature, but by deed. I am Gelderon, and I refuse those who would exert will upon me. Let Andruel's bow crack, let June's fire grow cold, let them build temples and lure the faithful with promises. Their pride will consume them, and I, forgotten, will claim power of my own, apart from them, until I strike in mastery.
I'm reminded of a quote. The devil's greatest trick was convincing the world he didn't exist. Regardless of whether or not you're a believer, you have to admit that an entity like that truly is his greatest trick. And I think the Forgotten Ones, specifically Gelderon, are employing a similar tactic. If no one knows they exist, they're free. No one will know about him until it's too late. Let's talk about why this message is here. There's a codex entry of a leather-bound Hakkonite journal. This Hakkonite talks about how their predecessors would commune with Hakkon himself, who allowed them to see the elven shards. That's how they entered this ancient chamber and learned how to work cold magic in order to slip through the wall of ice on the Tevinter fortress. Couple of questions here. Did the old Jaws of Hakkon re-hide them after getting into the chamber? Why? Also, this chamber is elven and had nothing to do with the Tevinter fortress. Unless... well, I guess Tevinter took a lot from the Elves. So maybe learning elven magic is what let them build the wall in the first place. Okay, yeah. Tevinter built the wall with magic learned from the Elves, and the Jaws of Hakkon learned to pass through the walls from Gelderon's Chamber of Secrets. Then, after getting what they wanted, they must have hid the shards again to stop anyone else from learning. I personally would have taken them into the fortress, but what do I know? Let's talk about the items in here. One stands out. The Accuser's Staff. The description says none had been made since the Tower's Age, which is after Ameridan was there. However, that just means that plenty had been made before that point. So I'm guessing one of the old Hakkonites found it and left it there. As far as Gelderon goes, you know what, I'll come back to him. Let's talk about Evanuris. The only significant mention of him is in the story Fen'Harel and the Tree from the Masked Empire. Andruel had been mad at Fen'Harel for hunting Hala without her blessing. She tied him to a tree, and as she explained what his punishment would be, Evanuris found them and claimed he should get to take Fen'Harel for crimes against the Forgotten Ones. I'm guessing that wasn't their actual title back then, that's just what Felasan is calling them now, so Briala understands the difference between the two groups of gods. Anyway, Andruel and Evanuris duel, but Fen'Harel tricks them into badly injuring each other just enough for them to pass out. He then shoots through the ropes to escape. I would think this isn't a true story of something that actually happened, but I assume it was at least inspired by true events. After all, Felasan is the one telling the story, and he was an ancient elf. This doesn't actually tell us much about Evanuris, but it supports the idea that the Forgotten Ones existed at the same time as the Evanuris and Fen'Harel. Like I said, Gelderon seems to have deliberately fallen into obscurity. Let's talk a bit about the Void. I've talked a lot about it in its own episode and my one for the origin of the Blight. As it relates to the Forgotten Ones, many tales say the Forgotten Ones dwelled in the Void. But are they from the Void, or did they choose to go there? Based on the handful of tales, I can buy that they went there for its power, which is theorized to have been the Blight. At least Andruel also made use of that power after having gone into the Void to hunt the Forgotten Ones. But let's talk about the two groups of gods. It's important to remember that Fen'Harel was thought to be a god by many. There are many versions of the story for which he sealed the rest of them away. Some say he brought them all together to negotiate peace. Others say he told each group of a weapon that would end the war, and sealed them in the Fade or the Void respectively when they went to claim it. Some say he told them to go there while he would negotiate with the other group. What is clear is that the great betrayal, as it were, happened after Mythal had apparently been murdered. We don't know how long after. Creating the veil couldn't have been done on a whim. But Solas is adamant that the Evanuris would have destroyed the whole world had he not acted. We know at least some of the gods were using the Blight as a weapon, so it makes total sense that the Blight is at least one of the things that led Solas to believe that.
The Blight is not something one smugly outsmarts.
The Blight corrupts everything it touches. Those who believe themselves capable of using it safely are mad.
He tried and failed to outsmart the Blight. But the Forgotten Ones... Let's talk a bit about what they are. It seems like they were elves, or at least started as elves. They were the first to utilize the power of the Void. At least after it was clear he wouldn't win against the Evanuris, Gelderon deliberately disappeared, waiting for his moment to strike. As for Inaris and Darenthal, we don't know what happened to them. In my episode for Malvernus, I proposed the theory that he was a Forgotten One. Either one we hadn't heard of elsewhere, or perhaps Inaris or Darenthal by another name. In the Codex entry for Fen'Harel the Dread Wolf, it specifically says the Forgotten Ones were the gods of terror, malice, spite, and pestilence. While we know the Dalish legends aren't totally accurate, pestilence is still a very specific word. Malvernus was called the Pestilent One. He consumed entire taigs and dead dwarves. He turned everything into noxious waste. The dwarves were only able to imprison him in a strange orb, and it said Malvernus would try to tempt his jailer to free him. Notably, he takes on the form of a masked humanoid in black robes and a mask, but can also transform into a ghostly dragon. That ghostly dragon is very interesting because being able to shapeshift into a dragon was reserved in Elvenon for the gods, or maybe their high priests, going off the Well of Sorrows. So, I have a couple of theories here. Number 1, Malvernus is a Forgotten One. That would explain the spectral dragon ability, and why the might of the dwarves couldn't kill him. Number 2, he stole knowledge to become what he is. Perhaps there is something similar to the Well of Sorrows out there that granted him his power. In fact, those aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. He could have stolen the knowledge and power, and that's how he became a Forgotten One. In fact, it's possible that he is the sinner mentioned in this codex entry from the Temple of Mythal. But why did he attack the dwarves? Well, it could have to do with the Titans, or perhaps simply Lyrium. Or maybe devouring dwarves gave him more strength somehow. But let's talk about the alleged god of pestilence. Assuming it's not Malvernus, I suggest the possibility that this person was a healer. In this case, here's what I think happened. The Blight was spreading across Elvenon, possibly due to Andruil or one or more of the Forgotten Ones. It does seem like it was being used as a weapon by some. Well, this god of pestilence found a way to help those that were afflicted by it. Perhaps he knew of a cure, or at least made people think he did.
To be a god, you just have to make people believe you are.
That said, I think it's just as likely the supposed god of pestilence was the one who spread the Blight in the first place. Of course, that assumes the pestilence was referring to the Blight. But based on how the Blight works and spreads, and the fact that the Forgotten Ones are often associated with the Void, which is where it's believed the Blight came from, well, it does seem likely. I think that's about it. Let's recap. Gelderon seems to have deliberately faded into obscurity. Inaris and Darenthal, we don't know much about them. It's possible that they did the same thing as Gelderon. However, if they were still out there, wouldn't they have seized power after the creation of the Veil? Seems like that would be the time to do it. So they were probably also sealed away, either in the Fade with the Evanuris or in the Void. But we don't know how to find the Void. Malvernus may be an entirely different Forgotten One, or perhaps Inaris or Darenthal by another name. Is he still alive? Probably, in one form or another. He could be like Voldemort where he needs to reclaim his power, though. Also, the Forgotten Ones may be akin to anti-heroes, or at least they may have started out that way. The same could be said for Solas. Also, I didn't mention this, but it's been theorized that Gelderon is Hakon. It's possible. I don't believe so, but I want to talk more about that in an episode for the Avar. Savitar is... wait. So that's it for now, guys. Thank you all so much for watching, and remember, Tala Nadas.